coming up on Judge Rinders' crime stories.
You could see where the flames had gone up the stairs, the windows were popped, the PVC was twisted and buckled. You knew that whoever had been in the heart of that fire was seriously injured.
It wasn't just petrol, it had been mixed. What that does, it makes the liquid burn more fiercely and for longer. That tells me that this was totally premeditated.
And later,
a secure store had been broken into and nitrous oxide had been stolen from within.
It was looking that this was now a national conspiracy rather than just a localised burglary offence.
this first case demonstrates that in just a few seconds, an entire family's world can be shattered forever. The crime was so serious, in fact, that it affected even seasoned police officers and led to a manhunt involving an entire force. The detectives involved in the case were fearful that the perpetrator could strike again, and that even the police themselves might become a target. Newton Heath, Greater Manchester, is the place that 49-year-old Julie Archer called home. She raised her two sons, Jaron and Raoul, and her daughter Quibilla in nearby West Gorton. And Quibilla has some treasured memories of these times.
We went through a lot of growing and learning together, helping each other and supporting each other. We went through a lot together. She was bubbly, spontaneous. She was grounded, humble, but she liked to have a laugh and joke. She wasn't always serious.
Quibilla still lived at home with her mum, and the morning of the 29th of February 2016 started full of optimism.
I remember being lay on the couch with my mum. We were just having a brew before college. I remember it being sunny and was happy, and for once we were getting on. So I remember it being a good morning, a happy morning.
Upstairs, preparing for her day at college, Quibilla heard someone at the door. Julie answered.
I went towards the landing and looked at the door. It was Stephen. She said, "Come in, darling." I've gone back into Mum's bedroom to get ready because I had to get ready for college.
The visitor was Quibilla's uncle Stephen, Julie's brother. Her curiosity satisfied, Quibilla returned to the bedroom.
I was drying my hair, having music on. Then all of a sudden, you just heard some big earthquake. The ground shook, the TV shook, walls shook. The ground felt warm. Why is the ground warm? Switched the hairdryer off and the music off. I'm hearing the smoke alarm. I've opened the door. I've just seen some big, thick, black smoke all on the landing. I knew my house was on fire. I tried to go to the stairs, and the fire was coming towards the stairs, so there was no way he was going down at all. I went back into my mum's room at the front of the house, and I've dialed 999. I see my mum on the driveway, fully naked, and I think she had petrol on her. And then I screamed. She's naked, why she got petrol on and she's naked? People started running over, they see my house was on fire.
Her mother was engulfed in flames. Her clothes disintegrated in the blaze. Quibilla was powerless to help, trapped upstairs in the house.
People was just on the grass telling me to jump, and I was like, I can't. It's too high, and he was like, you've got no other way to get out. If you don't, you're gonna die. So I had to just jump.
Emergency services arrived shortly after Quibilla's leap for survival. They were greeted by a scene that to even the most hardened of emergency workers would have been disturbing. Julie had suffered catastrophic burns to 70% of her body. To ensure Julie's survival, medical teams airlifted her to the nearest specialist burns unit.
More news now. Satellite. Suffering
burning from her home. David Boston's wife.
Granada Report's news correspondent Matt O'Donoghue arrived at the scene and witnessed the devastation.
We were there very, very soon after the fire service had put the flames out, and there was still this acrid smell of burning plastic in the air. It's the sort of smell that you first get when you turn out to fires like that, and it's the UPVC windows that you can see have melted. It was obvious that the fire had been particularly fierce. The whole of the front of the house was destroyed by fire. You could see where the flames had gone up the stairs. The windows were popped. The PVC was twisted and buckled. You knew that whoever had been in the heart of that fire was seriously injured. Over the days, the police and the hospital were telling us that the condition of Julie was life-threatening, and her burns were described as akin to those that you would see in a horror movie.
But what had caused the fire? And where was Stephen? Almost immediately, the police were able to start answering these questions, as remarkably, Julie managed to talk before she left the scene, and she'd named Stephen as her attacker. In order to locate Stephen Archer as soon as possible, investigators released his name to the news media and the general public.
It's not usual for officers to immediately name somebody like that, so that said to us that they already knew who they were looking for.
Whilst police began their investigation, Julie's family were discovering the devastating news. Her younger sister Gillian was one of the first to be notified.
I was in work, and I think it was about 12 o'clock-ish or something. The police come on the phone and said that Julie had been burnt, and then mentioned Stephen, and I just said, is he petrol bombed her?
Gillian was aware that Stephen had a long-term obsession with making petrol bombs. It didn't take police investigators long to discover this was Stephen's weapon of choice.
As you went into the lounge, there was a two-seater sofa on your right-hand side, so it looked like he'd been in the lounge, thrown the petrol over her, set her on fire, then discarded the bottle in the dining room.
But tests revealed that this was no ordinary petrol bomb. Stephen had created his own lethal cocktail.
It wasn't just petrol, it had been mixed. What that does, it makes the liquid burn more fiercely and for longer. That tells me that this was totally premeditated.
It was clear Stephen was dangerous and that the police needed to act fast.
There was intelligence that he carried petrol bombs with him. He'd set his sister on fire using petrol. He was high risk, and we set a manhunt in place looking for him.
The first port of call, Stephen's home. Armed officers stormed the property. The arsonist was nowhere to be found. But what police discovered next would elevate the manhunt to another level.
During the search of that address, they recovered a note, and within that note, he made a number of threats against the police, saying that he was going to pick the police off. It was a direct threat towards police officers who were looking for him.
It wasn't just the police who were targets, so too were other members of his family. But why? What had made Stephen do this to his own sister? As police dug into Stephen's past, the motive became clearer.
It took us a few days, but it became clear. Stephen Archer was, in effect, the black sheep of the family. He'd previously got mental health issues. He was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic.
Stephen was poorly from a young age. I mean, Mum says as far back as probably 9, he was poorly then. I come in one day and Stephen was sat in the front room in the dark with a candle reading a witchcraft book. It just escalated from there. He was just like saying people were doing weird stuff. We were staying at friends and they were doing voodoo on him and everything. He just started talking strange.
It wasn't until 2001 that Stephen was officially diagnosed with schizophrenia. Julie also suffered with the illness herself, so could empathise with her brother's condition.
Julie was trying to encourage him to take his medication, but he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't accept he was ill.
Stephen is a paranoid schizophrenic, but so too is his sister Julie. And there you have the difference. People with mental illness are not murderers, but murderers sometimes suffer with mental health issues.
Stephen's illness had led to a strained relationship with family members for some time. But why had he decided on now to attack Julie? It became clear that it all started when their elderly father, Jeffrey, went into a care home following a stroke.
He decided that he needed 24-hour care, so he decided they wanted to go in a home, so he chose to go in the home.
Stephen believed that Gillian and Julie had forced their father into the care home and were taking food to poison him. He decided to turn up at the home, unannounced.
Stephen seen me with the food, and he said, "What's that?" So I said, it's my dad's dinner. Well, why are you bringing him food? And I said, because he doesn't like the food here. My dad was proper stressed out, really upset. I want rid of him. Don't let him in, don't let him in. And I said, right, Stephen, you need to go now. So he did, he left.
Gillian might have thought that this was the end of the matter, but in fact, it was only the start. Believing the sisters were stopping him from seeing his father, Stephen began sending abusive messages to both Gillian and Julie.
I said, stop writing that my sister had dumped him in there. And I said, he chose to go in it himself. Started with text messages because I blocked him on Facebook.
The fact that his sisters are both welcome in his father's life, and yet he's being rejected. So in his head, it's about them, not about his father's feelings towards him.
Stephen's dad passed away in January 2016, followed just 11 days later by his elderly uncle. Stephen believed Julie and Gillian were responsible.
Stephen became really, really paranoid and believed that his sisters were responsible for killing both of them.
He believed we killed him. In his head, he believed that me and my sister poisoned my dad and killed my uncle.
He sent a number of emails to the care homes saying this is what had gone on. And on the 17th of February, he actually reported to the police that he thought his sisters had killed the father and their uncle. So the police investigated that part of it, but it was clear that it was just totally unsubstantiated. Both men were ill, quite elderly as well. It was just natural causes that they died of.
When my dad passed away and my uncle passed away, I think his illness went to another level. It just made him snap.
With Stephen Archer still on the run and his sister Julie's condition deteriorating, there was a fear that she wouldn't pull through. With a potential murderer on the loose, the police needed to do all they could to catch Stephen before he could strike again. Coming up,
Stephen!
would Stephen claim more victims?
In one hand, he's got a bottle, and the other, he's got a lighter.
Calm down!
On the 29th of February 2016 in Newton Heath, Greater Manchester, Julie Archer was a victim of a horrific arson attack, leaving 70% of her body covered in serious burns. Julie's attacker was her very own brother, Stephen. He had a history of mental illness and was known to be in possession of petrol bombs. The police launched a manhunt, believing him to be a danger to the public and to the rest of his family. 3 days after the attack, whilst Julie lay critically ill in hospital, the family was shocked to receive messages from Stephen.
On the 3rd of March, Wendy, Stephen's mum, received 2 cards. One of them was a birthday card to her. He basically said, "Mum, just a note to say I'm truly sorry for what I did to Julie, but believe she deserved it for what she did to Dad. She needs to confess, and so does Jill for her part." There was another card, which was a get well soon card, addressed to Julie. He said, "Julie, karma has punished you through me. I couldn't kill you and never will, but I can't forgive you for what you did to my dad and uncle. Tell us the truth. Come on, please." Signed, Steve. It showed us that he was admitting the act. He was saying that he was responsible for setting Julie on fire.
He wants her to know that he doesn't feel bad. He sends a card to his mother saying that it's Julie's fault. So again, he reinforces the fact that he has thought about this, he has acknowledged what he's done, he has recognised the injuries he's caused, and you know what? He's glad, because she deserved it.
Whilst the police began to process this new and disturbing evidence, Raoul, Julie's son, was rushing home from abroad to see his mother for what could be his final goodbye.
I went straight to the hospital, and then I got the news from the doctor saying that when she came in, she had 7%, it's gone up to 90%. One organ's working, but these 2 are not working. If she did make it, she'd probably have a limited life.
With Raoul present, the family now had to make a heart-wrenching decision.
That was the hardest question I've ever been asked in my whole life. If we wanted to keep on fighting or let her go. And even now, I still feel a bit guilty, but I said I don't want her to keep fighting in that pain. I said, I think it's just best if you let her go.
Just turn the machine off was the best thing, really, because she was in an atrocious state, looking atrocious.
I told my mum, we're going to be okay, we're going to get through it, we're going to pull each other through. And it was like she was listening to me and was reassured by that. And then after I said that, she passed away.
Three days after the horrific attack, Julie Archer passed away. This was now a murder investigation. However, the pursuit for Stephen up to this point had been challenging for investigators.
The difficulty that we had was that he was a bit of a nomad, he was a bit of a survivalist and was quite used to living outdoors.
He preferred to live out in the wild. He didn't like to be in a flat. He just preferred to be out in the open, living in old sheds and stuff.
Despite Stephen's ability to stay off-grid, the morning after Julie's death saw a breakthrough in the investigation.
We'd put briefings out to all local forces with photographs of Stephen on them. And an off-duty police officer had seen these briefings, and him and his girlfriend were going out this day, and they were at New Mills train station. There was a guy in front of the officer who we quickly identified as being Stephen Archer.
The off-duty policeman followed the fugitive onto the train and called the sighting in. The train destined for Marple in Stockport was greeted by officers ready to stop Stephen in his tracks.
Police officers arrive.
Stephen! Stay back.
Calm down. In one hand he's got a bottle, and the other he's got a lighter.
Calm down! Stay back!
And as soon as he realises it's the police, he starts trying to undo this bottle.
Risking their own lives, the officers took Stephen down.
Get in! Down! Down!
During his arrest, he said something of interest to officers.
What he said to them was that he didn't mean to kill her, he just meant to maim her.
Stephen was taken into custody and from there on in he refused to talk, but this did not prevent him from being charged with Julie's murder. It was now the job of the police to build up a case against him ahead of the trial.
One of the first things I'm thinking is how it's going to play out at court, so I consider what defences are likely. The obvious ones in this case were, first of all, diminished responsibility through previous mental health issues. That was the first angle that they looked at, and the defence psychiatric assessment came back that it could possibly have a defence to diminish responsibility. However, we got a second opinion, and our psychiatrist said that although he clearly did have a mental illness, he wasn't capable of taking that forward as a defence.
Although this defence was Stephen's best chance of a reduced jail sentence, he would shock officers and legal teams alike when he refused to use this approach.
Stephen himself didn't want to go down that line. I genuinely think he didn't want to end up in a mental health institution.
As with most cases of this nature, court proceedings were delayed by psychiatric assessments. Less common, however, is a defendant striving to delay a trial.
After he knocked back the diminished responsibility defence, Stephen decided to sack his defence team.
We had to wait 6 months originally for the trial. Like, literally dropped his lawyers the day before the trial, and then because the new lawyers didn't have time to catch up with their evidence, the trial got delayed again for another 6 months.
I think he likes the attention that he got, so I knew he was going to do something to make sure that trial dragged out as long as I did.
Finally, the trial started on the 20th of March 2017 at Manchester Crown Court, over a year after the attack on Julie.
Roll went to all of it, I think, which I couldn't do. I only wanted to go if I needed to go. But yeah, that was hard. Very hard.
Watching him on the stand, he's just lying and just chatting a lot of rubbish. You want to just get up there and just punch his head in.
As the trial began, Stephen was to surprise everyone with his line of defence.
He said that he'd gone round there to try and scare Julie, to get her to tell him the truth about what had happened with the father and uncle. He said he sat down at the bottom of the stairs, and at that point, he decanted the petrol out of the bottle into a pint pot that he'd taken with him, his intention being to try and frighten Julie into telling him what he perceived to be the truth.
At that point, Stephen claimed he saw what he thought to be a knife in Julie's left hand, and afraid for his own life, he said he threw the petrol in self-defence.
He realised that what he thought was a blade was actually a cigarette lighter. At that point, as he'd thrown the petrol, she was actually lighting a cigarette. His defence was that this was, first of all, self-defence, and secondly, an accident. I thought that was absolute nonsense, and so did the whole of the prosecution team. The actual seat of the fire, where it had first started, was on the right-hand side of that two-seater sofa. She was sat down at the time. She wasn't coming towards him. This was just a story that he'd made up.
The prosecution had to prove that Stephen had intended to kill his sister. The evidence against him was, in fact, overwhelming.
It became very clear that there was a massive amount of premeditation here. He had planned this. He had gone to a garage, and he created this cocktail mixture that when that went up, it was going to do Julie the maximum amount of damage.
He'd gone out of his way to make sure that the mixture he prepared did just that. I mean, that is incredibly malicious and premeditated. You know why you're going, and you know the result that you're going to get.
The prosecution case was further strengthened when Stephen's own sister, Gillian, took to the stand.
I had to give evidence against him, but I didn't want to see him. I just had a screen put up.
We managed to recover Gillian's phone, and within that, there were a series of text messages which sort of painted the picture about what was going on in the background. We also managed to recover some Facebook messages where he'd been threatening both the sisters.
He had put public postings out there that he blamed his sisters for creating a rift between him and his father. And at the reading of the will, Stephen had been cut out of that will.
He was writing on saying that he was my dad's next of kin. And I said, you're not my dad's next of kin, me and Julie are. And he just said to him in big letters, if fate was to strike yous down now, then I become next of kin.
This was damning evidence. Not only did it give a motive for the attack, it also strongly implied to the jury that his actions were premeditated. But some of the most incriminating evidence was from CCTV footage taken from outside Julie's house.
Julie had set a camera up just above the front door outside. He got off his push bike and he calmly walked down the path and into the house. The most damning piece of evidence that the jury probably saw during that trial was him leaving the house. He just set his sister on fire. He wasn't trying to escape the flames because he was in fear of his own life. He calmly walked down that path.
It is the most aggressive way of murdering somebody, and it's one of the most painful ways too. And to be in close proximity of that, and to know you've caused that, that demonstrates an incredibly dark nature.
After hearing all the evidence, it was time for the jury to make their decision. But would they agree on a verdict?
The jury went out, and they were out for a long time, which concerned me, really, because the amount of evidence that we had was really overwhelming. When the jury came back, they found him not guilty for arson with intent to endanger life, which was relating to the fact that he'd set the premises on fire and Quibilla was upstairs. The family, you could see, were absolutely distressed over that.
The prosecution had failed to convince the jury of Stephen's guilt on this count, which was a huge blow to the family's confidence. However, there was one more verdict to come.
They came back with a majority verdict of a guilty plea for murder.
Stephen Archer was found guilty of murder.
Stephen Archer sat there and shook his head in disbelief, as if the world was still conspiring against him. He was still detached from the reality of what he'd done.
Stephen was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 27 years.
He's not free, I am free, and I've got to take full advantage of that. I can't let him destroy me like he's tried to destroy my mum, and can't let him do that. I've got to keep going, I've got to keep fighting. I tell myself every day I cannot let him destroy me.
I was relieved that he wasn't coming out because I know his head's still the same. And if he does come out, it's coming for me. I know that. But where he is, no. I think he should be in a mental hospital, not in prison.
Like I say, if he would have got 5 months, 27 years, a million years, it didn't make a difference, because the main thing is it didn't bring my mum back.
This family now have the difficult job of trying to rebuild their lives and to ensure that Julie's memory lives on.
I never wanted my mum to be remembered because of what happened. I wanted her to be remembered as what she was: happy, bubbly, helpful, loving, kind.
She's the soul of the party, really, yeah. She'd turn up, and if it was quiet, she'd make it. Everyone get up and dance. I just wish she was still here today, so I didn't have to speak about it, and she'll actually be doing it, but...
We just take one day at a time, make sure Julie's kids are okay. That's all we can do.
Stephen Archer's sentence was close to 3 decades behind bars, and of course reflects the seriousness of his offense, and especially the weapon he used in his attack. In his summing up, the judge made it clear that to intend to maim someone by fire is as culpable as intending to kill them. The judge had no doubt whatsoever that this was murder. With Stephen now behind bars, Gillian no longer feels that her life is under threat. But of course, she still has to come to terms with losing her sister to a fate she believes could have been hers. Coming up, the police are hot on the trail of a gang of criminals. But during the getaway, lives are put at risk.
At the time, it was dark and quite poorly lit. A fair amount of members of the public and vehicle traffic moving about on the car park, so it does have the potential to be quite a dangerous situation.
Organised crime requires sophisticated policing nationally and internationally to stop it. Gangsters, of course, don't always confine their law-breaking to certain cities or towns. They carry out their crimes across the length and breadth of the country. And of course, sometimes around the world. Our next case required the work of national policing after a gang first came to the interest of authorities in Darlington in the northeast of England. Darlington, the evening of the 18th of March 2015, and a gang of criminals were preparing to strike. 11:44 p.m. and CCTV at Woodlands Hospital in the town filmed the men driving into their grounds. The men proceeded to break into an outside store and, after stealing its contents, made their escape. The following morning, Detective Tom Edwards from Durham Constabulary was called to the scene.
A secure store had been broken into and nitrous oxide had been stolen from within. I thought to myself, why would people be targeting nitrous oxide? And at that time, I think it had been in the press. It was being used in the music scene, at music festivals. People were inhaling it and getting a high from it. What they were doing was decanting into balloons. The market at that time for the laughing gas was £2 to £3 per balloon. So they were making somewhere in the region of £2,000 to £3,000 per canister.
11 canisters of nitrous oxide had been stolen from the hospital, making it a highly lucrative haul with a minimum street value of £22,000. The theft of the gas would have a major impact on the hospital's patients.
Nitrous oxide's used as pain relief in surgery, so there's a potential that these people who are going there for surgery, there's a chance that surgeries have been delayed, not able to go ahead, cancelled at very, very short notice.
It was down to Tom to see what clues had been left behind by the thieves.
There was tool marks on the doors. If we were at some stage to recover items used to force doors, we can then do comparisons with the damage at the point of entry, and then you can directly link them to those scenes.
Tom also found some fibres from gloves and hats, which would be valuable future evidence. If the police were to make any arrests, they could compare these fibres with any garments found in the criminal's possession, with the hope of making a direct match. But it was the CCTV footage that offered a valuable lead.
As soon as I saw that CCTV, I knew that the vehicle involved was a Honda CR-V. Vehicles have to have registration plates displayed. So I immediately thought, ANPR opportunities. It's automated number plate recognition. It's a Honda CR-V in Darlington at 23:44 hours on the 18th of March with ANPR cameras. You can track vehicles that are in the area at that particular time.
By accessing CCTV and traffic cameras in the area, Tom was able to find footage of the vehicle used in the theft. Better still, the car number plates were visible. He now had a major lead.
If that vehicle is in any part of the country and it activates a camera, then that information is there readily available to the officers so that they can stop the vehicle and obtain details of those inside.
But Tom still wasn't satisfied he'd done enough. He had suspicions there was more to this crime than met the eye.
I just knew there was something that said to me, good feeling, there's going to be more to this than this one burglary at this one hospital in the northeast of England. So I put some still images onto the intelligence bulletin, along with an overview of what had happened, and that was circulated to all forces. Within 5 or 6 days, there was phone calls coming in from Avon and Somerset, Devon and Cornwall, Police Scotland.
It seemed Tom's hunch was right. This break-in wasn't just a one-off. This was an organised gang of criminals travelling the country to commit thefts of nitrous oxide. It was now even more imperative that the men responsible were caught. It wasn't long before the vehicle used at the hospital theft was spotted. Just 7 days later, the Honda CR-V had been picked up by an ANPR camera on the M6 motorway near Birmingham, triggering an alert. PC Martin Smith of the Central Motorway Police Group raced to join fellow patrol cars hot on its trail.
We knew where it was going and what it was doing. We keep tabs on it in that respect so we can implement a plan, really, to get it stopped.
Before long, there were 3 police vehicles in pursuit, and the pressure was now on the officers to predict the gang's next move.
There's always an adrenaline rush when you're involved in these situations. You never really know how they're going to unfold and what's going to happen at the other end. Have they got weapons? You know, are they going to attack you? Will they run off?
In a shock move, the car started pulling into the nearby motorway services. It seemed that the criminals could be wise to their police trail.
Once they got onto the service area, then they were going quite quick in a confined space, driving around in circles.
The criminals rammed one of the chasing saloon cars, and with members of the public's lives at risk, the police had to act fast.
That moment, tactically, the best decision is to block the vehicle in to stop it moving.
With no way out, the suspects fled on foot into a wooded area behind the services. The police may not have caught the culprits, but they now had something nearly as precious.
Physically getting hold of the vehicle and the forensic evidential opportunities inside the vehicles were paramount importance. It was just as important to get the vehicle as it was to get the people, because we can put vehicles to people, peoples to vehicles, and both of those to crime scenes.
Could the contents of the car give them the clues to the identity of the gang?
A number of items were left behind in the vehicle. We're talking about mobile phones, cutting equipment, spare number plates. From there, there's a huge amount of forensic opportunity. This is an absolute jackpot, almost like a golden egg. There's so much there for us to work with.
The police were hot on their trail, but to crack the case, Tom needed to bring in reinforcements.
This was a cross-border organised crime group, and I also was aware that I was in receipt of a wealth of forensic opportunities, so I thought to myself, this will be of interest to NERSU.
Tom had made contact with the Northeast Regional Special Operations Unit, NERSU, where he spoke to Detective Susie Hall.
We aim to disrupt and dismantle organised crime groups that harm the Northeast communities. And we do this by pursuing those criminals relentlessly and prosecuting them successfully to bring those responsible to justice.
Susie said that they would deal with the telecommunications and the satellite navigation side of the inquiry, and they then suggested items that I ought to prioritise for forensic work. And we're talking about hat, gloves, drinks cartons that were left inside of the vehicle.
With a wealth of evidence to explore, the police were closing in on the gang. But could they get their men? Or would they slip through the net once again? Coming up, as a spree continues, the criminals began to make mistakes.
One of the offenders had distinctive swallow tattoos either side of his neck. We then positively identified this individual.
When canisters of nitrous oxide were stolen from a Darlington hospital, police became suspicious. Was this a standalone crime? It soon became apparent that a group of organized criminals were stealing the so-called laughing gas from hospitals up and down the country in order to sell them on for huge profit at raves and festivals in Britain. The situation was so serious that a specialist policing unit called NERSU, the Northeast Regional Special Operations Unit, were brought in to work on the case. Could they help find the answers needed to identify this group of serious criminals? DC Susie Hall at NERSU was particularly interested in analysing several mobile phones and a satellite navigation system that had been left inside the car.
I would call this the golden nugget in terms of our evidence. After we examined that sat-nav, it was evident it'd been used by this criminal gang to travel to and from these hospital locations as far as Devon and Cornwall, all the way up to Perth and Scotland. This team had travelled hundreds and hundreds of miles to commit their offending, and they'd used this sat-nav to travel to those locations. After seizing the mobile phone devices, as a detective, we can speak to the mobile phone providers. We can obtain call data records, and with those records, we were able to attribute these mobile phones to the suspects, James McNeil and Benjamin Marrett, by examining those call records.
Investigators now had two names, James McNeil, aka Lips, and Benjamin Merritt, both from the Aldershot area in Hampshire, and both of whom already had criminal records.
There was actually images of the suspects themselves on those mobile phone devices, and these are all ways that we could connect the suspects to that vehicle and, again, to the crimes.
James McNeil's mobile phone contained even further incriminating evidence.
What was quite interesting on that device was that he'd been taking screenshots of Google Maps of hospitals he had either targeted or intended to target in the future.
While Susie had been focusing on the telecommunications and sat-nav, Tom Edwards at Durham Police had been tasked with carrying out forensic analysis on some of the objects found in the car, which had revealed some very interesting results.
DNA analysis put James McNeil in the vehicle that had been seized. There was a drinks carton found in the vehicle, and DNA also put Ben Marrett in the vehicle that had been of the burglary in Darlington. The chances of those people being somebody else or mistaken DNA, when we get the report through, it'll say that the chances are 1 in a billion. So we can be almost certain, beyond all reasonable doubt, that they are the people that we need to speak to regarding these offences.
The police had two potential suspects, and with the help of some information provided by the NHS, they were now able to build up a picture of the sheer scale of the criminal activities that James McNeil and Ben Merritt were involved in.
What became apparent is that the National Health Service were actually looking into nitrous oxide thefts on a national scale, and their operation was called Operation Leopard. We cross-referenced that with what we were looking at the office, and it was evident that this team had been committing crimes down in Devon and Cornwall, up to Perth and Scotland, Humberside, North Yorkshire, Cumbria, Surrey, Dorset. We then contacted the local police forces to where those burglaries had occurred. From that point, this investigation snowballed, and we were looking at Operation Bloodstone.
Local police forces provided them with a mountain of evidence. Whilst working through this, the team was soon able to verify the identity of a third suspect.
One of the first offences we looked into occurred in November 2014 at Elmsley Dental Clinic. What was key about this offence is that it had some very good quality CCTV footage. One of the offenders had distinctive swallow tattoos either side of his neck. We then positively identified this individual as Mark Fosh.
Mark Fosh was a known criminal. With growing confidence, the gang continued to plan the next attack, this time in East Yorkshire. Completely unaware that the net was closing in, they started to get complacent.
We were contacted by a detective called Tom Napier, who had 2 offences in his force area.
There were 2 offences overnight, one at Bridlington Hospital and one at Alfred Bean Hospital in Driffield. Both hospitals had outside stores attacked and nitrous oxide canisters were stolen. At Alfred Bean, there was footage of a yellow van that was picked up coming into the hospital site. The actual offence was not captured. However, within a couple of minutes, you had 2 people running back towards the van, and the van was clearly moving, so there was a third suspect who was also in the van.
2 canisters of nitrous oxide had been stolen from the Alfred Bean Hospital, and the large yellow van used was leased from a hire company, with a company name clearly identifiable down the side of the van on the CCTV.
Inquiries with that company shows that the van was actually hired by Mark Fosh himself in his true name.
Mark Fosh, he's gone to local companies, hired the van, probably not thinking that he'd ever get caught. You know, that's come back to haunt him, really.
But Mark Fosh wasn't the only one of the 3 suspects who could be linked to the theft.
Tom Napier's inquiry showed that that van was abandoned near to the hire vehicle office. When that van was forensically examined, this could connect James McNeil to the van.
The men continued to be complacent, clearly believing themselves to be above the law.
What soon became apparent is these individuals would often stay in hotel accommodation near to the offences that they were going to commit. They would often book into these hotels in their true name, and this is where they became sloppy. They'd buy food and drink and walk away without paying. These hotels would contact the police and form a complaint, and together we were able to pick these pieces of the jigsaw and put them all together.
The gang had clearly underestimated the capacity and intelligence of the police.
I believe these individuals committing offences hundreds and hundreds of miles away from their hometown in the thought that police forces would not speak to each other. But they were wrong, because we do speak to other police forces and we do dig deeper. And that's when these individuals got found out.
After a series of arrests, by August 2015, the 3 perpetrators were on remand, charged with conspiracy to steal after committing a staggering 32 offences between November 2014 through to August 2015. A 4th member, Nicholas MacDonald, was also charged for his involvement in the crimes, dating back to April 2015.
These individuals were located, they were arrested, and they were interviewed by myself and the investigation team. What resonates with myself is that no time during these police interviews, during the court process, did one of them show any remorse whatsoever for their criminal activity. There is no doubt that this organised crime group were fueling the demand for nitrous oxide across the whole of the UK, and they were relentless in their activity, as demonstrated by the fact that they were prosecuted for 32 offences.
It was good to know my gut feeling at the beginning was correct. It was an organised, cross-border, organised crime group that were involved in these burglaries. And it was nice to know that the inquiries that I undertook at the beginning of the investigation were vital to the conclusion of the case.
On the 21st of April 2017, at Teesside Crown Court, the 4 men learnt their fate.
Benjamin Marriott, Mark Fosh and James McNeil all received a 3-year custodial sentence. Nicholas MacDonald received 18 months custodial.
A prison sentence for a group of men who cared little for the harm they were causing.
This series of burglaries has had a huge impact on the NHS estate. Not only has it cost the NHS to replace the cylinders, it's cost the NHS in terms of repairing the outbuildings, it's cost them in manpower. More profoundly for me, these individuals have put the health and well-being of the people who need it the most, such as the sick, the elderly, and the vulnerable, at risk.
This gang of thieves profited from selling the nitrous oxide gas they'd stolen onto others, who were distributed at raves and music festivals around the country. These men had no concern whatsoever for the well-being of those whose hands it might fall into. Because the thing is, inhaling nitrous oxide gas can cause a drop in oxygen levels in the body, causing unconsciousness, and in rare cases, death. At the hospitals affected by their thefts, operations were cancelled because of lack of pain relief, and that left sick and vulnerable patients without vital treatments. One day, of course, these individuals or their families may need the help of our NHS, and I hope then they realise the selfishness behind their serious criminal actions.